morning and welcome to Words That Matter, a modern day book club. I'm your host, Lee Smith. I have a very big smile on my face all day and yesterday as well, thinking about the show today because we have a terrific guest and really one of the grandmasters of political strategy and a great guy, too. He's going to be speaking about a book today that came out about 2 years ago by a former business partner of his, and he's going to give us the details on that. One of the reasons why this book is so important is because it sheds light on something that, of course, I've been reporting on since we first started to see evidence of this in 2016, and this was the intelligence community, intelligence services, media, political operation targeting Donald Trump and Donald Trump aides as Russian assets. So the author of this book, Paul Manafort, was one part of the Trump team who was targeted by the FBI, the Clinton campaign, and Obama spy chiefs. But our very special guest this morning, again, one of the great grandmasters of political strategy and a great guy, he was also targeted by this same group, Mr. Roger Stone. Roger, welcome this morning. Again, I have a huge smile on my face. I'm so happy to be speaking with you all the time, especially on our show today. Welcome.
Well, I'm delighted. I'm delighted to be here with you, and of course, I always love talking about books. I've written 5 books myself. My first book, a New York Times bestseller. My other books, all Amazon bestsellers. I'm a pretty facile writer. But I must tell you, in trying to write my own story of the 2-year ordeal that Robert Mueller and the Democrat media cabal put my wife and my family through, as I try to write that, you would think, and Lee, you're a writer, you would think it would be cathartic, but it's not cathartic. It's deeply disturbing. So I will knock out my book about the attempted assassination of President Ronald Reagan, which is one of 2 books I'm working on at the same time. I will knock it out, in time for Christmas. But I've struggled now for over 2 years with the horrific story of being put through a Soviet-style show trial, having all your rights stripped away, and being gagged so you could never defend yourself. Exactly what, of course, they're trying to do to Donald Trump at this very time, which is why I was incredibly inspired by Paul Manafort's book. I have to be honest with you. Paul Manafort and I have been friends since the college Republicans. We're both from Connecticut. I met him at the 1970 Connecticut Republican State Convention, where he was working for Congressman Tom Meskel. They called him the Ronald Reagan of the East, who ran for and was elected governor. I was there supporting Meskel and supporting State Senator John Lupton for the U.S. Senate, who was a great conservative champion. And Manafort was put through hell by Robert Mueller. Manafort was not, of course, charged with any crime that had anything to do with Donald Trump or the Trump campaign. They dusted off 15-year-old business investigations that they had previously closed for lack of sufficient evidence or other flaws in those cases. They basically brought them forward and charged Manafort with a group of financial crimes, I think largely to squeeze him, to try to make him spit up something about Donald Trump, which, of course, he refused to do. Of course, there was no Russian connection to spit up, but they never really, as you know, understood that. This man was put through hell. He was given a hard time, and it is outrageous that today Mueller and Weissman and Swalwell and all of them, Comey, they base the success of their entire investigation on the false claim that as Donald Trump's campaign manager, Manafort had given proprietary secret polling information to a man named Konstantin Kalimnik, who the investigators claim was a Russian intelligence asset. But he's absolutely proved that Konstantin Kalimnik is not a Russian intelligence asset. In fact, he's a U.S. intelligence asset. He's reporting regularly to our embassy in Kyiv. The independent journalist Matt Taibbi has documented the fact that Konstantin Kilimnik is not a Russian asset. In fact, he worked previously for Senator John McCain, even though he was a foreign national. So Manafort's book is historic because it disproves the only shred of what they have when they're pressed. Well, what did you learn in the Russian collusion? Where's the Russian? Oh, well, the two proofs that they always cite are this passing of polling to Putin, a fraud, as documented in Manafort's book, and then also, of course, the famous Trump Tower meeting, which is a fraud, as well, because the Russian woman lawyer who is sent to meet with Donald Trump Jr., Manafort, and others, is sent by Fusion GPS, and she's debriefed immediately after the meeting by Fusion GPS. She's an agent provocateur. She provides no information of value, which no one takes any action on. So the two proofs of Russian collusion that Schiff and all those guys who were using the Steele dossier and the alleged hack of the Democratic National Committee by Russian intelligence as the two rationales for what, as you know, wasn't really an illegal coup to take out a duly elected president. Manafort's book is amazing in the sense of his spiritual strength. He talks very openly in the book uh, how the Bible sustained him, how his faith sustained him, so how he never lost his anger, how he became, I think, very stoic. They moved him from prison to prison to prison. He would be sleeping on cold cement floors in ice cold cells at some point in his incarceration. The
Right.
special counsel Andrew Miller has made certain that Manafort's been put through hell.
Roger, I just want to say I'm very moved by what you're saying because of course people know that you were put through hell as well. So the fact that you're talking about an old friend and you're sympathetic with his pain and you speak admiringly of his faith, of his resilience. I mean, it's very moving to hear someone again like you who suffered as well talk about talk about your friend like this. Um, why was it so important for them to go after Manafort?
Well, first of all, remember Manafort in Italian means strong hand.
Yeah.
Paul Manafort's father, Paul Manafort Sr., was the Republican mayor, multi-term mayor of New Britain, Connecticut, a city, an industrial, hard-bitten city where Democrats overwhelmingly outnumber Republicans, but he was a popular Republican mayor. Manafort had this unique skill within the Republican Party that is very rare, and that is he understood convention politics. In other words, the Republican National Convention is governed not by some state or federal law, but by its own rules, which it adopts on the day that it opens. And Manafort was a master of that process because the process that is used to elect the young Republican national chairman is the same process that's used in our mutual state of Connecticut, where we both learned it. So Manafort became an expert in convention politics, delegates, committees, and so on. F. Clifton White was the master of this. He had nominated Goldwater, Bill Brock Bill Timmons of Tennessee, who was Nixon's director of congressional affairs, was a master at this. It's a lost skill understanding convention politics because Trump could have been denied the nomination, even though he had run the tables in the primaries and caucuses. This happened before in 1952. Taft came to Chicago with more than enough delegates to be nominated. The Eisenhower people skillfully used the Credentials and Rules Committee to unseat Eisenhower delegates in Louisiana, Mississippi, and Texas, costing Taft delegates, and Eisenhower rolled to the nomination. Taft had this nomination locked up. So it had happened previously. You'll recall Kasich and Ted Cruz and Jeb Bush and Marco Rubio had entered into a Stop Trump alliance. And these people's knowledge of the rules of the party was superior to Trump, who was an amateur. He wasn't a politician. So this is why I, among others, not solely me, but I, among others, recommended that Manafort be airdropped in to do the convention. And then Trump was so impressed with Manafort's crisp efficiency compared to the chaos by the show run by Corey Lewandowski, he asked him to become chairman of the campaign.
Well, I'm just going to say, is it possible that Trump would not have gotten the nomination without Paul Manafort?
That's absolutely true because we did not have a majority in the rules or the how or the credentials committee. So you see, while Trump had been running up all these delegates, no one in his campaign was paying attention to who the state party chairs or the state committees were designated as the two members of these all important committees. So we had committees stacked against us. For example, I think Louisiana, Trump sweeps all delegates, but the six people on the key credentials, rules, and platform committee are not Trump people. So yeah, so there was the opportunity for the same kind of mischief that was done in 1952. I mean, they basically, if you control the credentials committee, you can unseat a delegation for any perceived flaw in their selection and seat your own people. So yeah, I think that is
Fascinating.
absolutely true.
So did the Clinton people perceive Manafort as a big threat as well?
That is also absolutely true. A very high level New York Times reporter who I had a conversation with told me that after the selection of Manafort, or more importantly, the replacement of Lewandowski with Manafort, that the Clintons were upset because Manafort had a crisp efficiency and he knew what he was doing. I mean, the truth of the matter is, Manafort left an extensive written plan when he left the campaign, when the press hounded him out of the campaign over a front page story about a ledger in Ukraine that turns out to be a total fabrication
I remember it
of the
well.
Ukrainian
Yes.
intelligence services. But the New York Times has, of course, never retracted. So it was a takeout job. Manafort is a very capable individual, but he has a particular expertise, of course, in convention politics. And I don't just mean the grubby mechanics of getting nominated on the floor, but also the television spectacle that you have to put on for the American people. It helps define your campaign and your candidacy. Manafort, I think, did an excellent job at the last convention. Had some notable moments, very extremely well orchestrated. Uh, Remember, millions and millions of people are watching, and that some of them are undecided. So the book is a great read. I think Manafort. First of all, what I really respect is he wrote most of it himself. He's never written a book before. You can feel his heart and his pain here. I know his wife, Kathy. She worked for me at the National Conservative Political Action Committee. So his wife is a longtime colleague of mine and friend of my wife and me. She was tragically injured in a horse falling off of a horse several years ago. But we were reunited I would say, 6 months ago. We had dinner. The four of us had not been together since the inauguration of Donald Trump.
Roger, it really is. It really is like getting a history lesson, and also reading an interesting Vanity Fair article. All the insight and all the color you have on stuff. It's just such a huge pleasure to speak to you. We have to cut away for less than a minute. If you are watching on YouTube, we are going to Epoch TV exclusively. Please make sure to make the jump with this because you don't want to miss a single second. We come back, we're going to maybe talk a little bit more about Paul Manafort's book, the upcoming convention, but I really want to talk to Roger about his own books. Which of his books are his most favorite? So please make sure to make the jump. Back to Epoch TV. We'll see you less than a minute. Thanks.
What the FBI has now been all about is improving its brand. And the way that it does that is twofold. They look for headlines, they look for what's going on in the news, and they can see if they can insert themselves into that. Recently, there was a report that they had indicted 4 Russians for war crimes. Well, if you actually read the press statement, none of the 4 Russians is actually in custody. They're actually still in Russia. And 2 of them, they don't even know their names, but they get the headline. The second one is they make up the quality with quantity. They adopt local cases on a nearly daily basis. So you'll have a local law enforcement agency that develops and works and investigates an entire case start to finish. And then the FBI comes in and scoops it up and says, well, we can bring a federal charge here, and takes it, and then plasters that they have stopped some sort of fentanyl trafficker when really it was a traffic stop from a uniformed police officer that pulled this person over, and then the FBI swept in at the very last minute. And of course, dragged the case out for several years so they could hit their quotas, which is really the ultimate problem to me with the FBI, that they are incentivized through a quota system to bring the crime numbers up so they can justify their budget, whereas you would think law enforcement's goal is to bring crime down.
He is an FBI agent who's been suspended. He's an FBI whistleblower, author of True Blue, my story from beat cop to suspended FBI whistleblower. We're having a great conversation, very important conversation with Steve Friend.